Mr Chairman.
Dr Megan Woods.
Chairman, and I'd like to take a call on two votes within this sector, the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery and the Earthquake Commission within this. That we've heard the traditional rubbish that we've heard from government members about the fantastic job that the Canterbury rebuild is and the amount of money being put into there and what a positive effect that is on New Zealand's economic development. Well, there is no denying that the rebuild of Canterbury has had a stimulatory effect on the economy. There's no denying that. But, Mr Chairman, this is the year when the Canterbury rebuild is forced to cease to become a net generator of growth within our economy. And one cannot fear the way that Canterbury and the rebuild of Canterbury and Christchurch is slipping down this government's agenda is because it isn't that source of economic growth anymore. Sure, there will still be money spent in our region and it still will be good, but it is not going to be driving economic growth in this country in the same way that it has been since 2011. Because, Mr Chairman, the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery portfolio has lurched from problem to problem under the leadership of Jerry Brownlee. That we have wide open spaces and wastelands in our city where the government action has meant to be happening. It simply has not been the case that the government has performed in the way that it should. Years on, only 5 out of the 12 anchor projects even have business cases completed. And, Mr Chairman, the anchor projects were meant to be the things within the central city that anchored the recovery, that provided the stimulus for private enterprise to build around and to fuel that development. Well, the anchor projects have become more of a weight and a millstone in the centre of Christchurch rather than a stimulatory effect. That what we have is delays, uncertainty, and these delays and uncertainty from government are actually causing capital flight from Canterbury. We're hearing on the ground in Christchurch all the time about vast sums of capital that is leaving Canterbury because the risk and the uncertainty is far too much for those investors to bear. Because there are fantastic things happening in Christchurch, there are wonderful things happening within the central city, but they certainly are more than likely to be something the government has nothing to do with. That where the government has touched something, it is subject to delays and repairs. Only last week we saw that the Treasury gave the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery and specifically the Central City the worst rating of any other government's expenditure on capital in this country. And how did the Minister respond? Well, Mr Chairman, when I was 13 years old and if I'd gone home and I'd blamed the report writer for a bad report, my parents wouldn't have bought it. But what we had from the Minister was a tantrum about Treasury. Rather than owning up and saying, yes, things haven't gone so well, we haven't seen the kind of progress that we would like to see in central Christchurch, we haven't seen the development that we need, and 5.5 years on we are behind schedule. But we're entering a new phase and I'd like to think that we can get on and do this. No, we saw the usual bluster from the Minister rather than owning the problem, and this has been part of the problem all the way through. That what we have is a Minister that has presided over a government department that has spent money telling Cantabrians that everything is okay when the blindingly obvious around them is that this is not the case. And, Mr Chairman, I just, in the final part of my contribution, want to turn my attention to the Earthquake Commission. Now, Mr Chairman, this is quite frankly something we must learn the lesson from. That we can see we've gone through yet another financial year where we have huge numbers of complaints, we have re-repairs on re-repairs occurring, we see the sale of people's property in Canterbury is falling through because of shoddy and dodgy earthquake repairs in the first time, and still, Mr Chairman, we have a government that refuses to open its ears, to open its eyes and understand that we must learn from these mistakes. What we have been through in Canterbury is not something that we ever want to see anyone in any other part of this country go through again. But this is a government that is intent on not learning from those errors, not learning how we can do this better. And this is something that we simply must face up to. Having an independent inquiry into the EQC.
I call Julie